Most video games are made up of characters who fall pretty neatly into the good guy or bad guy categories, but occasionally a video game narrative will pull the rug out from under you where someone who seemed like they were on your team, it turns out, never was. Of course, this is less impressive when you saw the rug pull coming from a million miles away because said bad guy was giving you sketchy vibes from the start. We covered 10 instances of this happening in a video a few months back, but you guys had so many suggestions for more video game baddies who seemed bad all along that we had to revisit the topic. As you'd expect, there are major spoilers ahead for the games we have to discuss, so beware. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 video game good guys you knew were villains all along. Commenter edition. Number 9. The Elusive Man, Mass Effect 2. He may have rebuilt our hero Shepard after an unfortunate run-in with a collector ship at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, which seems like a good guy move, but the Elusive Man had sus written all over him from the jump. We couldn't decide if it was the creepy eyeballs, Martin Sheen's performance, the association with the pro-human group Cerberus, or the shady-ass name that really did it for us, but at no point did we expect this guy to be a chill team player. You have no choice but to take on his missions and do his dirty work in Mass Effect 2. And to be fair, it doesn't feel so insidious when he's helping you build a sweet team and stacking you with the resources to do so. Still, when Mass Effect 3 came along and it became clear that the Elusive Man's motive was to use the Reaper tech to grow an army and ultimately control the Reapers themselves, no one was terribly surprised. If killing off a bunch of civilians didn't tip you off he was bad, the fact that he allied himself with bloody Counselor Udina should have. Ew. Even if he was indoctrinated, there's no excuse for that. Of course, his bad guy turn is a little less impactful if you, like me, chose the control ending, but try not to judge us blue ending people too much. Number 8. Wesker, Resident Evil. Nothing about Albert Wesker is particularly chill. Between the slicked back hair and the glasses, eyebrows were raised from the get-go, and he only got more suspicious from there. To begin with, Wesker curiously disappears for a big chunk of Resident Evil. And if you're a diligent explorer, you'll have also found files that reference his training at the shady Umbrella Corporation. While still working for Umbrella, you're introduced to Wesker while he's leading the STARS Alpha team under the Raccoon City Police Department. Apart from looking extremely evil, Wesker also sounds extremely evil, so it totally tracks that the viral strain in his blood skyrockets him to supervillain status pretty quickly. Before he decided he'd been chosen to wipe out humanity, Wesker already came with a backpack chock full of red flags. The dude was weirdly cold, acted incredibly strange, had a tendency to disappear at a moment's notice, and neglected to give a straight answer to anything. Not that you'd trust anyone who wears sunglasses at night and indoors in any situation, but if for some reason you did, Wesker is a blueprint for why you shouldn't. Number 7. Mark Jefferson, Life is Strange. There's always something a little shady about a teacher who's just way too nice, and that's Blackwell Academy photography teacher Mark Jefferson to a T. You'd be smart to be suspicious of this otherwise unassuming dude, because he's potentially one of the worst people in video games. We of course need to spoil the end of Life is Strange here, so big spoiler warning for you if you don't want to know what happens. At the end of the game, you slowly realize that the cool dude teacher is actually the game's main antagonist, who's been using his charm and stature to kidnap, assault, and kill students of Blackwell Academy. If you got the creep vibes early from him being way too nice to you, then this reveal late in the game probably wasn't too much of a surprise. While some players were totally blindsided by Jefferson's turn that he was actually an evil dude, those who've learned to be suspicious of people acting way too nice were tipped off pretty early. Number 6. Seymour, Final Fantasy X. Take one look at Seymour Guado, and it's pretty clear there's more going on here than just one of the maesters of Yavin with an air for the flamboyant. Tidus isn't having a bar of it early on, but everyone else appears to see him as a common victim of the state of the world and what he's experienced. The half-human, half-Guado hybrid was subjected to substantial childhood trauma, and, to put it plainly, did not cope with it in adulthood all that well. This led him to patricide, abuse of power, forcing marriage on Yuna, and a pretty full-on god complex where he's hellbent on mass extinction as a solution to the world's problems. Religious figureheads tend to get a little bit of a pass by NPCs in video games. I'm looking at you, Fire Emblem Three Houses, but they can't get past those of us sitting behind our controllers. Though Seymour's goal of ending sin might seem like a valiant one, deciding that the way to end the inevitable cycle of its return is to kill everybody off is a touch extreme, to put it lightly. Number 5. Atlas, Bioshock. We know you've heard it all before, and while you've seen Atlas and his would you kindly remark on many of our greatest twist lists before, you probably haven't spied him on a list about good guys who you knew were bad all along. We had to wait until the commenters edition for this one because I guess a bunch of you guys are just way more perceptive than I am. While gamers like me were shuffling along the underwater city of Rapture doing everything Atlas asked me to because I was so happy to hear a friendly voice in the oppressive game world, and the Irish accent certainly didn't hurt, some of you had already wised up. In the comments on our last video, a bunch of you guys pointed out there was something a little suspicious about the man in your ear. And you were absolutely right to think so, as you discover you were indeed manipulated the entire game, and Atlas is none other than Andrew Ryan's archenemy, Frank Fontaine. Whether it was Atlas suggesting that you should in fact harvest the Little Sisters, or figuring out that there are tidbits of his story that just don't add up, it turns out you should be suspicious of a disembodied voice. Number 4, King Carnelian, Dragon Quest XI. So far, we've confirmed you should not trust heads of religions, disembodied voices, or guys with creepy eyewear. But you can go ahead and add royalty to that list because they can be pretty darn suspicious as well. King Carnelian is the ruler of Heliodor. He's well loved by his people and appears to be perfectly polite when you first meet him. That said, he proves himself to be quite cruel to the Luminary when he's possessed by Mordegon. And to put it lightly, the vibes are just off. In what is probably my favorite explanation you guys had in the comment section of why someone seemed sus all along, one of you said he was simply too tall and lanky compared to the other characters, and that really tipped you off. I love it. Well, when you're right, you're right. King Carnelian also comes off pretty calculated and aggressive, which tips you off that you're about to be arrested and get your village destroyed. Oops. He also has a serious case of evil face. Number 3, Dutch Vanderland, Red Dead Redemption 2. Is Dutch the baddest dude in Red Dead Redemption 2? No, of course not. That dishonor goes to Micah Bell, who appeared on our previous list, and is probably my most hated character in all of video games. But Dutch screwed us over as well, and we totally saw it coming, and so did you, so here he is on this list. Micah may have been the biggest asshat in the West, but the only reason he was able to stir up the trouble that he did is that Dutch let him, and we simply can't let that slide. You guys noticed as well as Arthur and we did that every time Micah would royally screw up, Dutch would let him get away with it and lead us down the path to the next gigantic screw up. It was around this time and in collaboration with Dutch's fanciful and impractical thinking that you realized Dutch might turn on Arthur. For those who played the first game, which narratively takes place after Red Dead 2, where Dutch is an anarchistic baddie, this was signposted. Even if you hadn't though, the too good to be true musings of a desperate man just never seemed like they were gonna end well, and they don't. Number 2, Ryuzo, Ghost of Tsushima. For the uninitiated, Ryuzo is the leader of the legendary group of Ronin, the Straw Hats, in Ghost of Tsushima. He's old friends with our protagonist Jin and aids you throughout the game despite their dwindling numbers and imprisoned members. This is all well and good, right up until Ryuzo switches up on you, having been bribed to turn on their own people and team up with the Mongols in return for supplies. As you can imagine, this is a pretty crap situation for our hero, given the history shared between the two. But attentive players could see this twist coming a mile off, since Ryuzo never really seemed to have made peace with his bestie defeating him in their youth. Basically, the jealousy reeked off Ryuzo from the get-go, but the inevitable duel still definitely stings. When he didn't show up at the start of the big battle, it was clear something was going on, but Jin was hurt and naturally so were we. Even if you agree with him that Jin's uncle was sending them out to die, or you saw the backstab coming. We were rooting for you, Ryuzo. Shame on you. Number 1, Kreia, Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. This is a commenter edition, so it's only suitable that we pick an entry that you guys told us we missed out on including last time, especially as you described it by saying, the old Jedi lady in KOTOR 2 might as well have been wearing a sign. The old Jedi lady in this case, of course, being none other than Kreia, the very mysteriously veiled woman you meet very early on in Knights of the Old Republic 2, who turns out to be an ex-Sith Lord. Which is an interesting piece of information, but because nothing about her doesn't scream ex-Sith Lord, it's hard to be surprised. KOTOR has already trained us to look for enemies in our friends since the first installment, so when the enrobed old lady starts reading our mind, cryptically prattling on about the fourth, being cagey about her past, and giving us lectures for being too altruistic, most of us could smell a tricky final face-off with her as Darth Traya coming a mile away. Actually, if you go down the right dialogue path with her, she'll pretty much tell you straight up she used to be a Sith, so that's a pretty strong part of the you're going to have to fight her eventually puzzle. That's the end of our list, but let me know in that comment section if you can think of any more video game good guys that you had pegged as baddies from the jump. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're liking, come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald. But make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.